Caleb watched his wife die 7 years ago. Or at least, that is what his mother made him believe. Because the day he returned to his abandoned house, it did not feel empty. It smelled like her cooking. The lights were on. There was a child's bicycle outside. And in the kitchen, the woman he buried turned around and called another man's son hers. The front door was unlocked. That was the first thing Caleb Wright noticed, and it stopped him cold on the sagging porch of the house he had not stepped inside for 7 years. He owned 43 properties across the southeastern United States. He controlled a logistics empire valued at $1.6 billion. He employed over 9,000 people and had shaken hands with 2 sitting governors in the last month alone. But standing on this porch in a forgotten pocket of southwest Atlanta, staring at a doorknob that should have been rusted shut, Caleb felt like a lost boy all over again. The door was not just unlocked. It was warm to the touch, faintly vibrating with the hum of electricity that had no business running through these walls. Through the cloudy glass of the sidelight window, he could see the yellow flicker of a lamp. Someone was inside his house. Someone had turned a place he had sealed like a tomb into something that looked, impossibly, like a home. Caleb pressed his palm flat against the door and pushed. The hinges groaned. The smell hit him first. Garlic and onions cooking in butter, the earthy sweetness of cornbread, the sharp, clean bite of pine sol on old hardwood. His stomach twisted. Not from hunger. From recognition. Because this was how the house used to smell when Danielle was alive. When she would stand barefoot in the kitchen with her hair pinned up in a messy bun, humming gospel songs off-key while she stirred a pot of whatever magic she was making that night. Danielle, who had drowned 7 years ago in the black water of Lake Lanier. Danielle, whose body they never recovered. Danielle, whose empty casket he had watched descend into Georgia clay on a Tuesday afternoon, so hot the cemetery grass crackled under his shoes. Someone was living in his dead wife's house, cooking his dead wife's food, and Caleb was going to find out who. If you love stories that grip your heart and refuse to let go, take a second right now to subscribe to this channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss one. Trust me, you are going to want to be here for what happens next. 3 hours earlier, Caleb had been sitting in the back of a black Escalade watching downtown Atlanta shrink in the rearview mirror. His driver, Mr. Owens, navigated the freeway with the quiet precision of a man who had been doing this job for 11 years. Caleb wore a charcoal suit cut so perfectly it looked painted on. His watch cost more than most people's cars. His leather briefcase contained a preliminary purchase agreement from Halcyon Development Group offering $275,000 for the house on Birchwood Lane and 2 adjacent lots. They planned to demolish the entire block and build a mixed-use retail complex. It was clean money. Smart money. The kind of deal Caleb closed in his sleep. But sleep was something Caleb rarely found anymore. He was 36 years old with the posture of a man carrying something heavy that nobody else could see. His face was handsome in a severe way, sharp jaw, close cropped hair, dark brown skin that his mother always said came from his father's side. His eyes were the color of warm honey, striking against his complexion, and women noticed them constantly. Caleb never noticed back. He had stopped noticing women the day his wife died. Some part of him had drowned with her in that lake, and no amount of money or success had been able to pull it back to the surface. The city thinned as they drove south. Glass towers gave way to strip malls. Strip malls gave way to churches with hand-painted signs and corner stores with iron bars on the windows. The streets got narrower. The trees got taller. Caleb watched the transformation through tinted glass and felt the old familiar tightness in his chest. He knew these roads. He had ridden a bicycle down every one of them. He had scraped his knees on these sidewalks, played football in these yards, kissed Danielle for the first time under the busted streetlight at the corner of Birchwood and Vine when they were both 17 years old. Mr. Owens glanced in the mirror. "We are about 10 minutes out, Mr. Wright." Caleb nodded, but said nothing. His hands were cold. He rubbed them together and stared at the purchase agreement sticking out of his briefcase. $275,000. That was what his childhood was worth. That was the price tag on every memory, every laugh, every tear that had soaked into those walls. He told himself this was just business. He almost believed it. The Escalade turned onto Birchwood Lane, and Caleb leaned forward. The street looked worse than he remembered. Porches sagged like tired mouths. Yards had gone feral with waist-high weeds and rusted cars sitting on cinder blocks. A group of teenagers sat on an overturned shopping cart at the end of the block, passing a phone back and forth and laughing about something. Then Caleb saw his house. Number 47. And everything inside him went still. The house looked wrong. Not worse than he expected, but wrong in a different way. The yard was trimmed. Not professionally, but someone had taken a push mower to it recently. The porch had been swept. A clay pot with yellow flowers sat next to the front door. The windows were clean, or at least cleaner than they should have been after 7 years of abandonment. And there was a bicycle leaning against the side of the house. A small bicycle. A child's bicycle, blue with training wheels and a bell shaped like a ladybug. "Mr. Owens," Caleb said quietly. "Wait here." He grabbed his briefcase more out of habit than necessity and stepped out of the Escalade. The afternoon heat wrapped around him like a wet blanket. Cicadas screamed in the trees. He walked up the cracked concrete path toward the porch, his expensive shoes grinding against the weeds pushing through the cracks. His eyes kept going back to that bicycle, to the flowers in the pot, to the curtains hanging in the windows, curtains that had not been there when he locked this door 7 years ago and swore he would never come back. That was when he noticed the front door was unlocked. That was when he pushed it open and smelled garlic and cornbread and pine sol. That was when the floor of his world fell away. Caleb stepped into the living room and stopped breathing. The space had been transformed. Where he remembered dusty furniture covered in sheets, there was now a worn but clean brown sofa with throw pillows in bright orange and green. A woven rug covered the center of the floor. Against the wall sat a small bookshelf stuffed with paperbacks and children's picture books. Crayon drawings were taped to every available surface. A house with a red door. A dog with absurdly long legs. A son with a smiley face. A stick figure woman holding hands with a stick figure boy. No stick figure man anywhere. On the coffee table sat a half-finished coloring book and a juice box with the straw still in it. In the corner, a small television sat on a milk crate, its screen dark. The room was humble and clean and full of the undeniable evidence that a family lived here. A small family. A mother and a child. Anger flooded through Caleb so fast it made his vision blur. Someone had broken into his home. Someone had turned his sealed grief into their personal shelter. He was going to call the police. He was going to have them removed today. He dropped his briefcase on the floor and marched toward the kitchen where the cooking sounds were coming from. He rounded the corner, opened his mouth to shout, and then every word he had ever learned evaporated from his brain. A woman stood at the stove with her back to him. She was slender, wearing a faded yellow sundress and no shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, dark brown curls escaping at her temples. She was humming a song Caleb knew, a song that had been played at his wedding. She stirred a pot with a wooden spoon in her left hand, and Caleb saw the scar. A thin white line running from her left wrist to her elbow. A scar from a childhood accident involving a broken window. A scar he had traced with his fingertips 1,000 times in bed. His briefcase hit the kitchen floor with a loud slap. The woman spun around. The wooden spoon clattered against the stovetop. And Caleb saw her face. The same round cheekbones. The same gap between her two front teeth. The same dark brown eyes that used to look at him like he was the only solid thing in the world. 7 years older. Thinner. Lines around her eyes that had not been there before. But her. Unmistakably, impossibly her. Danielle. The word came out broken, barely a sound at all. More like the last breath leaving a body. The woman's eyes went enormous. Her hand flew to her chest. She staggered back against the counter and gripped the edge so hard her knuckles went pale. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The kitchen existed outside of time, frozen in the impossible collision of a dead woman and the man who had buried her memory 7 years ago. Then a small voice called from the hallway. "Mama, is dinner ready? I am so hungry I could eat a dinosaur." A boy appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was maybe 6 or 7 years old, compact and wiry, with a mess of tight curls and skin the color of caramel. He wore basketball shorts that were too big for him, and a faded Atlanta Hawks t-shirt. He had a gap between his two front teeth, just like his mother. And he had eyes the color of warm honey. Caleb's eyes. The exact same shade, the exact same shape, the exact same way the left one squinted slightly when he was confused, which was precisely what it was doing right now as he looked back and forth between his mother and the tall stranger standing in their kitchen. "Mama, who is that man?" the boy asked. Caleb could not speak. The room was spinning. He reached for the wall to steady himself and missed, stumbling sideways into the kitchen table. A glass of water tipped over and shattered on the floor. The boy jumped behind his mother, grabbing the fabric of her dress. Danielle scooped him up with the automatic strength of a woman who had been protecting this child alone for his entire life. She held him against her hip and looked at Caleb with eyes that contained no love. Only terror. Only fury. "Get out of my house," she said. Her voice was shaking but sharp, a blade wrapped in velvet. "You need to leave right now." "Danielle," Caleb managed. "You are. I know what you think I am," she interrupted. "And I am telling you to leave before I scream loud enough for every neighbor on this block to come running." "Mama," the boy whimpered, burying his face in her neck. "I am scared. Make him go." Caleb held up both hands. His entire body was trembling. He could feel tears burning behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not yet. I watched them put your coffin in the ground," he whispered. "They told me you drowned. They said." "I know what they told you," Danielle said. Her jaw was tight, her arms locked around the boy like a cage of bone and muscle. "And I know who told you. Now get out." "Who told me?" Caleb repeated, confusion layering on top of shock. "What do you mean who told me?" "The police told me. The Coast Guard told me. My mother." Something shifted in Danielle's face when he said that word. Mother. A flash of something old and deep and bitter, like touching a wound that had never properly healed. "Exactly," Danielle said. "Your mother." Before Caleb could respond, the boy lifted his face from his mother's neck and stared directly at Caleb. His honey-colored eyes were wet with tears and hard with a courage that belonged to someone much older. "You need to leave," the boy said. "My mama told you to leave. We do not want you here." Then Danielle stepped back and closed the kitchen door in Caleb's face. He heard the lock click. He heard her footsteps retreating. He heard the boy asking if the bad man was gone. And Caleb stood in the hallway of the house where he grew up, staring at a closed door, understanding nothing and everything at the same time. Caleb did not remember walking back to the Escalade. He did not remember telling Mr. Owens to drive. He did not remember the 45-minute ride back to his penthouse in Buckhead. He only became aware of himself again when he was standing in his living room, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Atlanta skyline, and realizing that the sun had gone down. His phone had 17 missed calls. His assistant Tanya had sent 9 text messages, each more urgent than the last. The Halcyon Development Group wanted to finalize the Birchwood Lane purchase. There were contracts waiting. There were signatures needed. There was money to be made. Caleb turned off his phone and sat on his leather sofa in the dark. Danielle was alive. He had a son. Everything he had believed for 7 years was a lie. He said it out loud to the empty room, testing whether the words would sound less insane spoken than thought. They did not. They sounded exactly as insane as they felt. He did not sleep. He sat in that same spot on the sofa while the city lights pulsed below him and the clock on the wall ticked through the hours. He replayed every detail. The scar on her wrist. The gap in her teeth. The way she hummed that song. The boy's eyes. His eyes, staring back at him from a face he had never seen before. And the thing she said. The thing that had lodged in his brain like a splinter. "I know who told you. Your mother." What did that mean? His mother, Gloria Wright, had been the one to receive the phone call from the authorities. She had been the one to tell Caleb that Danielle's rental boat had capsized on Lake Lanier during a solo evening outing. She had been the one to coordinate with the Coast Guard search teams. She had been the one to plan the memorial service when no body was recovered. She had been the one to hold Caleb while he sobbed and tell him that God had a plan even when that plan broke your heart. When the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, Caleb picked up his phone and typed a message to Tanya. "Cancel the Birchwood Lane sale. Tell Halcyon the property is off the market indefinitely." The response came within seconds despite the early hour. Tanya was nothing if not dedicated. Are you sure? They are offering well above market value. Caleb typed back 3 words. I am sure. Then he stood up, changed out of his wrinkled suit into jeans and a plain black t-shirt, and drove himself back to Birchwood Lane in his personal car, a modest gray sedan he kept for the rare occasions when he did not want to look like a billionaire. He parked 2 houses down and waited. At 7:45, the front door opened. Danielle came out holding the boy's hand. The boy had a green backpack with a cartoon rocket on it. He was talking animatedly about something, gesturing with his free hand, and Danielle was smiling down at him with a softness that made Caleb's chest physically ache. They walked to the corner and turned left, heading toward what Caleb assumed was a bus stop or a school within walking distance. He waited 15 minutes to make sure they were gone. Then he walked to the house. The old key still worked. The lock was different, cheaper, clearly replaced at some point, but the key turned with a grinding click and the door swung open. Caleb stepped inside with the quiet reverence of someone entering a church. In daylight, the house revealed more of its story. The furniture was secondhand but arranged with care. The kitchen was clean but the appliances were ancient. The refrigerator hummed with the desperate rattle of a machine running on borrowed time. Inside it, Caleb found milk, eggs, a bag of carrots, a half block of cheddar cheese, some lunch meat, and 4 apples. On the counter sat a mason jar with a handwritten label that read emergency fund. Inside the jar were coins and small bills. Caleb counted them. $37.62. He went upstairs. The first bedroom was the boys'. A twin bed with a blue comforter covered in planets and stars. A small desk where school papers were stacked neatly. Caleb picked one up. Elijah Foster, grade 1. Spelling test. Score 100%. Gold star sticker. Foster. That was Danielle's maiden name. The boy did not carry Caleb's last name. Did not even know Caleb existed, presumably. He opened another paper. A worksheet titled My Family, with a stick figure drawing underneath. A tall woman with curly hair holding hands with a small boy. Next to the drawing, in careful first-grade handwriting, my family is me and my mama. We live in a yellow house. My mama works a lot, but she always reads to me at night. I love my mama. Caleb put the paper down and pressed both hands against his eyes. He breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth, a technique his therapist had taught him years ago for managing grief attacks. It did not work. He crossed the hall to the second bedroom. Danielle's room. A double bed with a thin quilt. A dresser with a cracked mirror. On the dresser, a framed photo of Elijah as an infant, wrinkled and red and perfect, swaddled in a hospital blanket. Next to the photo, a spiral notebook. Caleb opened it. Medical bills. Page after page. Emergency room visit, $800. Pediatrician appointment, $140. Antibiotics for Elijah, $52. Some entries were marked paid with a red check mark. Others said payment plan. Others said past due. The numbers went on and on, a relentless catalog of a woman fighting to keep her child healthy on almost nothing. At the back of the notebook, Caleb found a manila envelope. Inside was a birth certificate. Name, Elijah James Foster. Date of birth, August 22nd, 2019. Mother, Danielle Marie Foster. Father, unknown. Caleb sat on the edge of Danielle's bed and held the birth certificate in both hands. August 2019. That was 7 months after Danielle's supposed death. She had been pregnant when she disappeared. Pregnant with his child. And he never knew. A sound from downstairs froze him. The front door opening. Small feet running. Mama, can I have the rest of the cookies? A pause. Then Danielle's voice, tight and careful. Baby, go wash your hands first. Then footsteps on the stairs, fast and light. Caleb had no time. The boy, Elijah, appeared at the top of the staircase and saw him standing in the hallway holding the birth certificate. Their identical honey-colored eyes locked. Elijah screamed, Mama, Mama, he is in the house. The man is in the house again. Caleb heard Danielle's feet pounding up the stairs. She appeared at the landing, breathless, and saw Caleb standing there with the notebook and the birth certificate in his hands, and her face cycled through 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, fear, rage, grief, and something else. Something that looked like resignation, as though she had always known this day would come. "How did you get in here?" she demanded, pulling Elijah behind her. "I had a key," Caleb said. "From before. This is my house, Danielle." "You broke into my house," she corrected. "You went through my private things. And you were scaring my son." "Our son," Caleb said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Elijah tugged at Danielle's dress. "Mama, who is he? Why does he keep coming here?" Danielle knelt down and cupped Elijah's face in her hands. "Baby, I need you to go to your room and put on your headphones. Listen to your favorite playlist. Can you do that for Mama?" Elijah looked at Caleb with distrust. "Is he going to hurt you?" "No, baby. Nobody is going to hurt anybody. We are just going to talk. Go on." Elijah retreated slowly, his eyes never leaving Caleb until his bedroom door closed. A moment later, Caleb heard the muffled thump of music through headphones. Danielle stood up straight. Her whole body was vibrating with tension. "You have 5 minutes," she said. "Then you leave, and you do not come back." 5 minutes, Caleb agreed. "That is all I need. Just tell me the truth. Tell me how you are alive. Tell me why you disappeared. Tell me why my mother's name made you look like you had seen a ghost." Danielle closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. "Fine," she said. 5 minutes. Let us go downstairs. I do not want Elijah hearing any of this." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The pot on the stove had been turned off. The garlic and cornbread smell still hung in the air, but it felt wrong now, a warm scent in a room gone cold with the weight of what was about to be said. "Your mother hated me from the day you brought me home," Danielle began. She did not look at Caleb. She looked at her own hands, flat on the table, as though she needed to see them to believe she was really sitting here having this conversation. She said it was because I had no education, no family money, no connections. She said I was a waitress from a nothing neighborhood who had gotten lucky enough to catch a man with potential, and that if she did not intervene, I would drag you down to my level and keep you there. Caleb opened his mouth to speak. Danielle held up her hand. "You asked for the truth. Let me finish." He closed his mouth. "After the wedding, it got worse. She called me every day while you were at work. Every single day, Caleb. She told me I was ruining your life. She told me I cooked wrong, cleaned wrong, dressed wrong, existed wrong. She said a real wife would know how to host a dinner party, would know which fork to use, would know how to make conversation with important people instead of embarrassing her son in front of everyone." Danielle's voice was steady, but her hands were trembling. "Then one afternoon, about 2 months after we got married, she came to the house while you were at work. She sat right here in this kitchen and put an envelope on this table. $50,000 in cash. She told me to take it and disappear. Leave that night. No note, no explanation, just vanish. She said it would be better for everyone, especially you. I told her no. I told her I loved you and I was not going anywhere. She looked at me with this expression I will never forget. It was not angry. It was calm, patient, like she was dealing with a child who did not understand simple math. She said, "You will leave, Danielle. The only question is whether you leave with money in your pocket or with nothing at all." Caleb felt his throat closing. Danielle kept going. 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified and thrilled at the same time. I wanted to tell you immediately, but I wanted it to be special, so I planned a whole evening. Dinner, candles, the works. But your mother found out first. I do not know how. Maybe she was having me watched. Maybe she went through our trash and found the pregnancy test box. I do not know. But she showed up the next day, and Caleb, she was furious. Danielle's eyes finally lifted to meet his. She said, "You think trapping my son with a baby is going to save you? All this does is make you a bigger problem." She told me that if I did not disappear on my own, she would have me committed to a psychiatric facility. She said she had a doctor on retainer who would sign whatever paperwork she needed. She said she would tell you I was mentally unstable. She said she would make sure I lost the baby, and she would make sure I lost you. And then she said the thing that made me realize I had to run. "What did she say?" Caleb whispered. Danielle wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She said, "Accidents happen on lakes all the time, Danielle. Boats capsize. People drown. Bodies are never found. It is tragic, But it happens. And the way she said it, Caleb, the way she looked at me when she said it. She was not speculating. She was planning. If you are still here, still watching, still feeling every beat of this story in your chest, drop a comment right now that says, I am still here. Let me know this story has you the way it has me. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Caleb could not feel his hands. He could not feel his feet. He could feel only a cold, expanding pressure in his chest, as though his ribcage was being slowly filled with ice water. What happened next? He asked. His voice did not sound like his own. Danielle stood and walked to the kitchen window. She looked out at the overgrown backyard where a plastic swing set sat rusting in the corner. I ran, she said. That same night. I packed one bag. I had maybe $400 saved from tips. I did not have a car because we only had one and you had driven it to work. So I walked 6 miles in the dark to the Greyhound station on Forsyth Street. But I never made it inside, she continued. A black SUV pulled up beside me in the parking lot. Your mother stepped out. She had 2 men with her. Big men. I did not know their names. They grabbed me, put me in the car, drove me to some kind of empty warehouse near the industrial district south of the airport. She turned from the window. Her face was drawn and gray, like a woman describing her own death, which in a way she was. Your mother had planned everything. She had a rental boat, a cheap aluminum fishing boat she had reserved under a fake name. She told me to drive it out onto Lake Lanier, leave it in the middle of the water with my wallet, my phone, my shoes, everything that identified me. Then swim to the North Shore, where one of her men would be waiting with the car. And then what? Caleb asked, though the answer was already forming in his mind like a wound opening. Then her men would go back to the boat and capsize it, Danielle said. Push it under. Let it sink part way and then float back up, like an accident. My things would be in the water. The Coast Guard would search and find nothing because there was nothing to find. And everyone, you, the police, the whole world, would believe I drowned. She hugged herself against a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. She gave me an envelope. $10,000. She said it was more than I deserved. She said if I ever tried to contact you, if I ever showed my face in Atlanta again, if I ever told anyone the truth, she would find me. And she would make sure that next time, the drowning would be real. Caleb put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. He did not make a sound, but the silence was worse than sobbing. It was the silence of a man whose entire foundation had just been pulled out from beneath him. So I did it, Danielle said quietly. I drove that boat onto the lake at midnight. The water was black and cold, and I was 3 months pregnant and terrified. I left everything in the boat, swam to shore in the dark. I could barely see. I swallowed water twice and thought I was going to drown for real, and part of me thought maybe that would be easier. But then I felt the baby move. Just a flutter. The first time. And I kept swimming. The man was waiting on the shore with a towel and car keys. He drove me to a motel 60 miles north. I stayed there for 3 weeks. I did not eat. I barely slept. I had nothing. No identification, no phone, no family, no name. I was nobody. Just a pregnant ghost hiding in a motel room, watching the news coverage of my own death on a television with bad reception. You should have found a way to tell me, Caleb said through his hands. You should have tried. She threatened to kill me, Danielle said. She threatened to kill our baby. And you want to know the worst part, Caleb? She paused until he looked up. The worst part is that I almost told you anyway. I almost called you from a payphone one night. I had the receiver in my hand. I was dialing the number. But then I heard your mother's voice in my head, and I asked myself the question she had planted there months before. If it comes down to your mother or me, who will Caleb believe? And I put the phone down, because I was not sure the answer was me. Caleb wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he would have believed her without question. But honesty locked his jaw shut because he did not know. He did not know what he would have done. And that uncertainty was its own kind of confession. What happened after the motel? Caleb asked. Danielle returned to her chair. She sat heavily, as though the telling of this story had physically drained her. I moved to Savannah, used my middle name, Marie, and my maiden name, Foster. Got a job bussing tables at a diner. Paid cash for a room in a boarding house. Had Elijah alone in a county hospital where nobody knew me. No family in the waiting room. No husband holding my hand. Just me and the fluorescent lights and a nurse who kept calling me honey because she could tell I had nobody. She almost smiled. But when they put him in my arms and I saw those eyes, your eyes, I knew that everything I had been through was worth it. Because he was alive and he was mine and nobody, not your mother, not the whole world, was going to take him from me. The first year in Savannah was the hardest, Danielle continued. Elijah was colicky. He cried for hours every night. I was working breakfast and lunch shifts at the diner, then coming home to a screaming baby in a boarding house where the walls were thin and the other tenants complained constantly. I had no health insurance. When Elijah got an ear infection at 4 months old, I sat in the emergency room for 9 hours waiting to be seen because I could not afford a pediatrician. The bill was $800. I paid it off $20 at a time over 3 years. There were nights when I sat on the floor of that tiny room holding him, rocking him, and I would think about calling you. I would imagine picking up the phone and hearing your voice. But then I would remember your mother's face. That calm, patient, terrifying face. And I would put the thought away like a knife I could not afford to touch. Some nights I wondered if you were looking for me. If you had hired a detective, if you were asking questions, if some part of you refused to accept I was gone. But I never saw any sign of it. No investigators showed up at my door. No one came asking questions. And eventually I understood that you had accepted it. You had accepted that I was dead and you had moved on. That was the loneliest realization of my life. I stayed in Savannah for 2 years, she continued. Then I came back to Atlanta. I know it was risky, but I had nothing. No savings, no support. And I knew this house was sitting empty. I figured you had moved on with your life, probably sold it or forgotten about it. So I changed the locks and moved in. I have been here ever since. Working 2 jobs. Stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day and cleaning office buildings at night. Raising Elijah. Hiding in plain sight. Praying your mother would never find out. Every morning I would walk Elijah to school and then take the bus across town to the grocery store. Every evening I would pick him up, make dinner, help him with homework, put him to bed, and then take another bus to the office buildings downtown. I would mop floors and empty trash cans until 2 in the morning, then ride the bus back home and sleep for 4 hours before doing it all again. Saturdays I would take Elijah to the library because it was free and he loved books the way you loved books. He would sit in the children's section for hours reading about dinosaurs and planets and robots. And sometimes I would watch him from across the room and see you so clearly in his face that it physically hurt, like pressing a bruise just to confirm it was still there. Caleb stood up. Something had changed in his face. The grief was still there, but it had been joined by something else. Something cold and focused and dangerous. I'm going to talk to my mother, he said. Danielle's eyes widened. Caleb, no. You do not understand what she is capable of. I understand exactly what she is capable of, Caleb said. That is why I am going. Stay here. Lock the doors. Do not let anyone in except me or my father. I will be back. Your father? Danielle looked confused. My parents divorced 4 years ago, Caleb explained. Nasty split. My father might know things. Might have access to records from when they were married. But I need to see my mother first. I need to hear her say it. To my face. Danielle stood and grabbed his arm. What if she denies everything? What if she turns it around on you? Makes you think I am lying? Caleb looked down at her hand on his arm. It was the first time she had touched him in 7 years. I spent 7 years believing a lie, he said. I think I will recognize the truth when I hear it. And he walked out the door. Gloria Wright lived in a sprawling colonial mansion in the Tuxedo Park neighborhood of Buckhead. The house had 6 bedrooms, a swimming pool shaped like a kidney, and a circular driveway paved with imported Italian stone. Caleb had bought it for her 3 years ago as a birthday gift. He pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. His hands were steady. His heart was not. He did not use the doorbell. He used his key. The foyer was cool and smelled of fresh lilies. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Mother, Caleb called. His voice filled the marble space like a gunshot. I know you are home. Your car is in the garage. Come downstairs. We need to talk. Footsteps on the landing above. The click of heels on hardwood. Gloria appeared at the top of the curved staircase. She was 61 years old and looked 50. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob. She wore cream-colored slacks and a silk blouse. A strand of pearls rested against her collarbone. She looked elegant and composed and utterly in control, the way she always looked, the way Caleb now realized she had been performing her entire life. "Caleb, darling," she said with a warm smile. "What a wonderful surprise. Why did you not call ahead? I would have had Rosa prepare lunch." "Danielle is alive," Caleb said. Gloria's smile did not waver. "I am sorry, sweetheart." "What did you say?" "You heard me. My wife, Danielle. The woman you told me drowned 7 years ago. She is alive. She is living in my old house on Birchwood Lane. And she has a son. My son." Gloria reached the bottom of the stairs. She touched her pearls the way she always did when she was buying herself time to think. Caleb had seen her do it 1,000 times at dinner parties and board meetings. It was her tell. The one crack in her perfect performance. "Caleb, you are clearly exhausted," she said. "You have been working too hard. This kind of delusion is what happens when you do not take proper rest. Come sit down. I will have Rosa make you some tea." "Stop it," Caleb said. His voice dropped low and quiet, which was always more frightening than shouting. "Stop performing. Stop managing. I was in that house today. I saw her face. I touched her hand. I looked into the eyes of a 7-year-old boy who has my face and my eyes and your cheekbones. And you are going to stand there and tell me I need tea?" Something shifted behind Gloria's eyes. A calculation. A recalibration. She walked past Caleb into the formal living room and lowered herself onto a white wingback chair with the deliberate grace of someone settling into a throne. "Even if this woman is who you think she is," Gloria said, crossing her legs, "have you considered that she might be manipulating you? You are a billionaire, Caleb. People will say anything for money." "She is not after money," Caleb said. "She has been living in that house for 5 years on $37 in tips, cleaning offices at midnight so she can buy groceries. Does that sound like a woman running a con?" Gloria examined her manicure. "It sounds like a woman who has had 7 years to prepare a story." Caleb felt the last thread of patience snap. "She told me what you did. Everything. The phone calls. The threats. The $50,000 you offered her to leave. The warehouse. The boat. The lake. She told me everything, Mother. And I want to hear it from you." For a long moment, Gloria said nothing. The classical music played softly. A clock ticked on the mantel. Then Gloria looked up at her son with eyes that had gone flat and cold. "You want to hear what from me exactly?" "The truth," Caleb said. "The truth about whether you faked my wife's death and stole 7 years of my life." Gloria stood. She walked to the window and looked out at her perfect garden with its manicured hedges and blooming azaleas. She was quiet for so long that Caleb thought she might not answer at all. Then she said, in a voice stripped of all warmth, all performance, all pretense, "Yes." Caleb's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a chair. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I arranged Danielle's disappearance." Gloria said it the way someone might report the weather. Factually. Without apology. "Yes, I hired men to stage the boating accident. Yes, I paid her to leave. Yes, I made sure the authorities concluded she had drowned. And yes, I would do it again." Caleb thought he was prepared for this. He was wrong. Hearing it from his mother's own mouth was like being hit by a car. Not the pain of impact, but the surreal disbelief that it was happening at all. "How could you?" he whispered. "Because I had to," Gloria said, turning to face him. "Do you know what you were before you married that girl? You were brilliant, ambitious, destined for greatness. And she was going to ruin it. A waitress with no education, no vision, no understanding of the world you were going to build. She would have kept you small, Caleb. She would have anchored you to that neighborhood and that life, and you would have been happy, and that was exactly the problem. Happy people do not build empires." Caleb stared at her. "You destroyed my family, so I would build a company." "I destroyed nothing," Gloria said sharply. "I removed an obstacle. And look what happened. Look at what you became. A billionaire. A titan. Your name is on buildings, Caleb. Your face is in magazines. You changed an entire industry. None of that happens if you were playing house with Danielle Foster on Birchwood Lane. I would trade every building," Caleb said, his voice cracking. "Every dollar. Every magazine cover. I would trade all of it for 7 years with my wife and my son. Gloria's lip curled. And that is exactly why I did what I did. Because you would have traded everything for nothing. For love. As if love pays mortgages. As if love builds legacies. Love, Caleb said, is the only legacy that matters. And you took it from me. I gave you something better, Gloria insisted. I gave you the world. No, Caleb said. You gave me an empty life in a beautiful cage. And I am done. He pulled a phone from his pocket. Starting tomorrow, I am going to make sure Danielle and Elijah are protected. Legally, financially, in every way possible. And I am going to make sure you can never come near them. If you do this, Gloria said, her voice dropping to a hiss, I will fight you. I have resources. I have connections. I have lawyers who will bury that woman in litigation until she cannot afford to feed that child. Then we are at war, Caleb said. And you should know, I learned everything I know about winning from you. He turned and walked to the door. If you walk out of this house, Gloria called after him, do not ever come back. Caleb stopped. He did not turn around. I was not planning to, he said. And he left. Caleb sat in his car in his mother's driveway with the engine off. His hands rested on the steering wheel, motionless. The perfectly manicured hedges blurred in his vision. He thought about all the Thanksgivings and Christmases and Sunday dinners he had spent in that house since Danielle's death, sitting across the table from his mother while she served roast chicken and offered gentle commentary about how he was working too hard, how he needed to take better care of himself, how she worried about him being alone. All those years of performed concern. All those years of looking him in the eye and asking if he was okay, knowing full well that she was the reason he was not. The depth of the deception was almost incomprehensible. It was not a single lie. It was a 7-year theatrical production, and his mother had played the role of loving parent without once breaking character. Caleb called his father from the car. Thomas Wright answered on the second ring. He was 63 years old, lived in a modest house in Decatur, and had not spoken to his ex-wife in 2 years. Caleb told him everything in one long, unbroken stream of words. When he finished, the line was silent for 10 full seconds. Then Thomas said, I always knew she was capable of something terrible. I just never imagined this. Did you know? Caleb asked. About Danielle? No, Thomas said firmly. God, no. When they told us Danielle drowned, I grieved just like you did. I had no idea. He paused. But there were things. Strange things. About a month after Danielle disappeared, I noticed withdrawals from our joint account. Large amounts. $60,000 in total, pulled out over 3 weeks. When I confronted your mother, she said she had made some private investments. I did not push it. But during the divorce, when I was documenting everything for asset division, I kept copies of every transaction, every statement, every email. I have them in a storage unit. I need those documents, Caleb said. Today, there is something else, Thomas said slowly. Your mother owned a warehouse property near the airport. She bought it about a year before Danielle vanished and sold it at a loss 6 months later. I never understood why she would buy industrial real estate. It made no financial sense. Now it does. Caleb gripped the steering wheel. That is where they took Danielle before the lake. Before putting her on the boat. Thomas's voice hardened. I will get those records right now. Meet me at my house in 2 hours. And Caleb, there is one more thing. During the divorce discovery, I found emails between your mother and a company called Pinnacle Protection Group. Private security. I flagged them as unusual, but my lawyer said they were not relevant to the divorce proceedings. They are relevant now, Caleb said. They are the most relevant thing in the world. Caleb drove straight back to Birchwood Lane. He was halfway there when his phone rang. Tanya, his assistant. Mr. Wright, your mother just called the office. She is claiming there are trespassers at the Birchwood Lane property. She wants us to file a police report and have them removed immediately. Caleb felt his blood go cold. She is already moving. Do nothing, Tanya. Do not file anything. Do not talk to her. Do you understand? Mr. Wright, what is going on? Nothing you need to worry about right now. Just trust me. He made it to Birchwood Lane in 20 minutes. Too late. 2 police cruisers were already parked in front of the house, lights flashing. Caleb slammed the car into park and ran to the front porch where 2 officers stood with notepads. One was a veteran with graying temples and a patient expression. The other was young, sharp-eyed, and clearly eager. "Officers," Caleb said, slightly out of breath. "I am Caleb Wright. I own this property. What is happening here?" The older officer checked his notes. "We received a report of unauthorized occupants at this address. A Mrs. Gloria Wright stated that squatters have been living here illegally." Caleb steadied himself. "There are no squatters here. This is my house. The people living here have my full permission and have had it for years." The younger officer tilted his head. "The caller said she was your mother. Is that correct?" "My mother," Caleb said carefully, "does not speak for me, and she does not have the authority to make reports about my property. The residents are here with my knowledge and my consent." The older officer frowned. "We still need to speak with the occupants. Standard procedure." Caleb wanted to refuse, but he knew that would only escalate things. "Of course. Let me get them." He opened the front door. Danielle was standing just inside, pale and rigid, holding Elijah's hand. Elijah's eyes were red. He had been crying. The officers asked their questions. Names. How long they had been living here. The nature of their relationship to the property owner. Caleb confirmed everything. Danielle followed his lead. Elijah stood behind his mother, silent and watchful. The older officer studied them all. When he was satisfied, he tucked his notepad away. "Everything checks out, Mr. Wright. But if we get called back here, we will need to do a more thorough investigation." "I understand," Caleb said. "It will not happen again." The officers left. Caleb closed the door and leaned against it. Danielle collapsed onto the couch. Elijah climbed into her lap and buried his face in her chest. "Is it over?" he asked. "Yes, baby," Danielle whispered. "It is over." But Caleb knew it was not over. His mother had fired the first shot, and Gloria Wright never fired just once. Elijah lifted his head from his mother's chest. His honey-colored eyes were swollen from crying, but sharp with something that looked far too old for a 7-year-old. "You lied," he said. His voice was quiet but steady. "Both of you lied to the police." Danielle and Caleb looked at each other. Elijah continued, "You always tell me that lying is the worst thing a person can do. You say that even when the truth is hard, we have to tell it. But you just lied. Right in front of me." Caleb knelt down. "You are right, Elijah. We did lie, and I am sorry you had to see that. But sometimes grown-ups have to make choices that do not feel good in order to protect the people they love. If we had told the police the truth, they might have taken you and your mom away from this house." Elijah considered this with the gravity of a small judge weighing evidence. "That does not make it okay," he said. "No," Caleb agreed. "It does not. But it was the best choice I could make with the time I had. I promise you, I am going to fix this so nobody has to lie again." Elijah studied him. "My mama says promises are just words until you keep them." "Your mama," Caleb said, "is the smartest person I have ever known." Elijah seemed satisfied enough with that answer. He slid off the couch and walked upstairs, his small shoulders carrying the weight of things no child should have to understand. 2 hours later, Thomas Wright arrived at the Birchwood Lane house carrying a banker's box. He stepped through the door and stopped when he saw Danielle. His eyes filled with tears. He crossed the room and hugged her without a word. She hugged him back and cried into his shoulder, and Caleb watched his father hold the woman his mother had tried to erase from existence, and he felt something fracture inside him that would never fully heal. Thomas pulled back and held Danielle at arm's length, looking at her face as though he needed to confirm she was real. "My God," he said softly, "it is really you. They told us you drowned. I went to your memorial. I planted flowers at your grave every spring for 3 years. I am so sorry, Danielle. For all of it. For everything you have been through." A sound from upstairs interrupted them. Elijah appeared at the top of the staircase, cautious and curious. He looked down at the 3 adults in the banker's box and the tears, and tried to make sense of the scene. "Mama," he said. "Who is that man?" Danielle wiped her eyes and managed a small smile. "This is Thomas. He is Caleb's father." Thomas looked up at the boy, and his face crumbled. The resemblance was unmistakable. Elijah had Caleb's eyes, Caleb's chin, and Thomas's own forehead, the same high, slightly rounded shape that had been passed down through 3 generations of Wright men. Thomas gripped the railing to steady himself. "Hello, Elijah," Thomas said. His voice wavered, but held. "I hear you are pretty good at school." Elijah shrugged with the studied modesty of a 7-year-old who was, in fact, very good at school. I got 100% on my last spelling test, he offered. Thomas laughed. A real laugh. Warm and surprised and full of a joy that had been waiting 7 years to arrive. That is wonderful, he said. I always loved spelling too. Would you like to come down and show me your drawings? I saw some on the walls. They are very impressive. Elijah looked at his mother for permission. She nodded. He came down the stairs slowly and led Thomas by the hand to the living room wall where his crayon masterpieces were taped in careful rows. Thomas studied each one with the serious attention of a man visiting a museum, and Elijah stood beside him, narrating every piece with the earnest pride of the artist. Caleb watched them from the kitchen doorway, his father and his son, together for the first time, having a conversation about crayon drawings as though the world had not just turned itself inside out. The normalcy of it was almost too much to bear. Thomas set the banker's box on the kitchen table and opened it. Inside were bank statements, property records, and a printed email chain. He laid them out like a prosecutor presenting evidence. $60,000 paid to Pinnacle Protection Group in 2 installments, he explained. Property records showing Gloria purchased and then quickly sold a warehouse in the airport industrial zone. And these emails. He slid a printed page across the table. Caleb read it aloud. Mrs. Wright, the matter has been handled per your instructions. The vessel was deployed and recovered at the specified location. All personal effects were included as discussed. Final confirmation of the outcome will be provided to authorities by our contact. Please remit the remaining balance to the account on file. V. Salinas, Pinnacle Protection Group. Caleb set the paper down. Who is Victor Salinas? Thomas pulled out his phone. I tracked him down this afternoon. Pinnacle Protection Group closed 4 years ago, but Salinas still lives in the area. I called him, told him I had documentation connecting him to the staging of a death 7 years ago. Gave him 2 options. Talk to us or talk to the district attorney. He chose us. He is willing to testify. Danielle covered her mouth. We can prove it. We can actually prove what she did. Thomas nodded. The bank records, the emails, the property records, and a cooperating witness. Any prosecutor worth their degree would take this case. Caleb began pacing. The energy in his body had shifted from grief to something kinetic and purposeful. We do not go to the police yet, he said. We go to her. We lay all of this on the table, and we give her one chance. One chance to sign a legal agreement that she will never contact Danielle or Elijah again. That she will never interfere in our lives. That she accepts full responsibility for what she did. And if she refuses? Danielle asked. Then we hand everything to the district attorney tomorrow morning and let the state of Georgia deal with her. The next afternoon, 4 people stood on Gloria Wright's doorstep. Caleb, Danielle, Thomas, and Victor Salinas, a tired-looking man in his 50s who kept wiping his palms on his pants. Caleb rang the bell. Gloria opened the door. Her eyes moved across each face, landing finally on Victor Salinas. Something behind her composure cracked like a fault line. What is this? She said. The truth, Caleb replied. Are you going to let us in? Or should we have this conversation where your neighbors can hear? Gloria stepped aside. They filed into the formal living room. Gloria sat in her wingback chair. The rest stood in a semicircle around her. Thomas placed the documents on the coffee table one by one. Bank records, property records, emails. Each one landed like a stone. This is the $60,000 you paid Pinnacle Protection Group, Thomas said. This is the warehouse you purchased to stage Danielle's abduction. And this is the email from Victor Salinas confirming the job was done. Gloria looked at the papers without touching them. And him? She gestured at Victor. I believe you already know Mr. Salinas, Caleb said. He worked for Pinnacle Protection. He is the one you hired to put Danielle on that boat and capsize it afterward. And he is prepared to tell a grand jury everything. Gloria's jaw tightened. She looked at Victor with an expression that could have peeled paint. He looked at the floor. Mrs. Wright, Victor said quietly. I am sorry. I should never have taken that job. What you asked me to do, it was wrong. And I have carried it with me every day since. Gloria said nothing. She picked up the email, read it, and set it down. Then she folded her hands in her lap with the careful precision of a woman who had spent her entire life maintaining appearances, even in the moments when everything was falling apart. "What do you want?" she asked. Caleb placed a single sheet of paper on top of the stack. "A legally binding agreement that you will never contact, approach, threaten, or interfere with Danielle or Elijah in any way. That you acknowledge what you did. That you surrender all claim to involvement in my life or theirs. Sign it, and we do not go to the police." Gloria read the document. Her face betrayed nothing. "And if I refuse? Then this box of evidence goes to the Fulton County District Attorney's office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning," Thomas said. "Fraud, conspiracy, filing false reports with law enforcement, threatening a pregnant woman, staging a death. Any one of those charges carries prison time. All of them together? Gloria, you would not see daylight again." Gloria set down the paper. She looked at Caleb. "Is this what you want? To humiliate your own mother?" Caleb felt something twist in his chest. Something that might have been pity if it were not drowning in anger. "I wanted a family," he said. "I wanted to watch my son be born. I wanted to teach him to ride a bicycle and read him bedtime stories and be there on his first day of school. You took all of that from me. So no, I do not want to humiliate you. I want you to understand what you destroyed. And then I want you to leave us alone." Gloria's eyes moved to Danielle. Danielle stood perfectly still. She did not flinch. She did not look away. "For 7 years I lived in fear of you," Danielle said. "I worked until my body ached. I skipped meals so my son could eat. I slept 3 hours a night and spent the other 5 listening for footsteps. You took everything from me except the one thing you could not take. My son. And he is the best thing in my life. The best thing in the world. And you tried to make sure he was never born." Gloria's composure finally broke. A single tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angrily, as though the tear had betrayed her. She picked up the pen. She signed the document. The pen scratched against the paper in the silent room. Caleb took the signed agreement. He folded it and placed it inside his jacket. "It is done," he said. "We are leaving now, and I am not coming back. If you ever need anything," Gloria started. Caleb shook his head. "I needed my wife. I needed my son. I needed a mother who loved me enough to let me be happy." He walked to the door. The others followed. At the threshold, Caleb paused without turning around. "Goodbye, Mother." The door closed behind them. That evening, Caleb and Danielle sat on the old brown couch in the living room of the Birchwood Lane house. Elijah sat between them, his small hands folded in his lap, his honey-colored eyes moving back and forth between the two adults who were about to change his world. "Elijah," Danielle began, "do you remember when you asked me about your daddy? Where he was? Why he was not around?" Elijah nodded slowly. "You said he went away before I was born. That he did not know about me." "That is what I told you," Danielle said. "And part of it was true. He did not know about you. But the rest of the story was more complicated than I could explain when you were younger." Elijah looked at Caleb. His eyes were careful, measuring. "Does he know my daddy?" Caleb's heart was hammering so hard, he was certain the boy could hear it. "Elijah," Caleb said gently, "your dad did not leave. Someone told him that your mom had died. He believed it because the person who told him was someone he trusted. And because he thought your mom was gone, he never knew you existed. He never got the chance to look for you." Elijah's forehead creased. "That is so sad," he said. "Somebody lied." "Yes," Caleb said. "Somebody lied. A very bad lie that hurt a lot of people for a very long time." Elijah thought about this. "Then where is he now?" "My dad. Does he know about me now?" Caleb looked at Danielle. She nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. Caleb took a breath. "Elijah, I am your dad." The boy stared at him. His mouth opened. No sound came out. For a long, terrible moment, Caleb thought the boy was going to scream or run or both. But instead, Elijah reached out and touched Caleb's face. He ran his small fingers along Caleb's jaw, his cheekbone, the bridge of his nose. Then he touched his own face in the same places. "We have the same eyes," Elijah said. "Yes," Caleb whispered. "We do. And the same chin," Elijah added. "And your ear sticks out a little bit on the left side. Mine does too. See?" He turned his head to show Caleb. Caleb laughed, even though tears were streaming down his face. "I see." Elijah was quiet for a moment. If you are my dad, how come you did not come find me? Because I did not know you existed, Caleb said. And that is my fault. I should have asked more questions. I should have looked harder. I should have never just believed what I was told. And I am sorrier about that than I know how to say. But you are here now, Elijah said. Yes, Caleb said. I am here now. And I am not leaving. Ever. Elijah looked at his mother. Mama, is he telling the truth? Danielle wiped her eyes and smiled. Yes, baby. He is telling the truth. Elijah turned back to Caleb. He studied him with the grave intensity of a child making the most important decision of his life. Then he launched himself into Caleb's arms and held on with everything he had. Caleb caught him and held him and pressed his face into his son's curls and let 7 years of grief pour out of him in silent, shaking waves. I always wanted a dad, Elijah whispered. I asked God for one every single night. And every single night, Caleb whispered back, I was missing something I did not even know I had lost. They stayed like that for a long time. Danielle watched them, crying freely now, her hand resting on Elijah's back. The three of them on that worn brown couch in a house that had been abandoned and reclaimed and turned into something that all the money in the world could not buy. A home. After a while, Elijah pulled back and wiped his nose on his sleeve. Can I ask you something? Anything, Caleb said. Do you know how to play basketball? Caleb smiled. I do. Will you teach me? I am the worst player in my whole class. I would love to, Caleb said. Starting tomorrow. Really? Elijah's face split into the widest grin Caleb had ever seen. It was Danielle's smile. It was his smile. It was their smile. Really, Caleb said. And Elijah, you do not have to call me Dad right away if you are not ready. You can call me Caleb until it feels right. Okay, Elijah said. He thought for a second. Caleb? Yeah? Can we have ice cream? Caleb laughed. A real laugh. The first one in 7 years. Yes, he said. We can absolutely have ice cream. In the weeks that followed, Caleb began the slow and sacred work of rebuilding what his mother had torn apart. He hired a family attorney and began the legal process of establishing paternity. He set up a trust fund for Elijah's education. He paid off every medical bill in Danielle's notebook and arranged for health insurance that would cover both of them. He did not move them out of the Birchwood Lane house because Elijah loved it there, but he quietly arranged renovations. A new roof, new plumbing, fresh paint, appliances that did not sound like they were gasping for air. Danielle quit the night cleaning job. She kept the grocery store job because she said she needed something of her own, something that was not tied to Caleb or his money or the past. He understood. The legal proceedings moved faster than expected. Caleb's attorney filed for a correction to Elijah's birth certificate, and a family court judge, after reviewing the evidence of Gloria's scheme, expedited the process. Within 6 weeks, the document that had once listed Father Unknown now read Father Caleb Anthony Wright. Caleb held the updated certificate in his hands and stared at his name next to his son's name and felt something click into place inside him, like a bone that had been dislocated for 7 years finally sliding back into its socket. He enrolled Elijah in a better school, one with a science program and a basketball court that did not have a bent hoop. Elijah was nervous on his first day. He stood at the front gates with his new backpack and his new sneakers and his old courage and asked Caleb if the other kids would like him. Caleb knelt down and straightened Elijah's collar. They are going to love you, he said. And if they do not, we will work on your jump shot until they have no choice. Elijah laughed. It was the same laugh Danielle had, bright and sudden and infectious. Caleb memorized the sound. They did not rush into anything. There was too much scar tissue between them for that. Some nights they sat on the porch after Elijah went to bed and talked for hours. Other nights they sat in silence and let the crickets do the talking. Some days were good. Some days Danielle would flinch when a car drove by too slowly, and Caleb would see the shadow of 7 years of fear cross her face, and he would know that healing was not a destination but a direction. Elijah started calling him Dad on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the truth came out. They were shooting hoops at the park down the block, and Caleb had just shown him how to position his fingers on the ball. Elijah took the shot. It bricked off the rim. He laughed and said, "Watch this one, Dad," and then froze, realizing what he had said. His cheeks flushed. Caleb knelt down and looked him in the eye. "That is the best word anyone has ever called me," he said. Elijah grinned. "Okay, Dad. Watch this one." The ball sailed through the air, hit the backboard, and dropped cleanly through the net. They both cheered like it was the championship game. Caleb's father, Thomas, became a regular presence in their lives. He came to dinner twice a week and taught Elijah to play chess. He told Elijah stories about Caleb as a boy, and Elijah would look at Caleb with delighted disbelief, as though discovering that his father had once been a child himself was the most astonishing revelation of all. Gloria Wright was not seen again. She did not contact Caleb. She did not contact Danielle. She did not appear at the house or the office or anywhere in their orbit. Caleb heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had sold the Buckhead mansion and moved to a condo in Savannah. He did not call. She did not write. The silence between them was neither peaceful nor hostile. It was just final. Caleb thought about her sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and Elijah was asleep. He thought about the woman who had taught him to read, who had driven him to school every morning, who had clapped the loudest at his college graduation. He tried to reconcile that woman with the one who had calmly ordered the destruction of his family, and he could not do it. The two versions of his mother could not coexist in his mind, so he let them both go. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, harder than building a company, harder than grieving a wife he thought was dead. Letting go of the mother he thought he had was the final loss, the one that completed the accounting of everything Gloria had cost him. One evening, months later, Caleb came home from work to find Elijah doing homework at the kitchen table and Danielle standing at the stove humming that song again, the one from their wedding. She turned when she heard the door and smiled at him, and for one suspended instant, the last 7 years folded in on themselves and vanished, and they were 23 again, standing in that same kitchen, holding hands across that same table, believing the whole world was ahead of them. They had lost 7 years. They could not get them back. But standing in that kitchen, with his son's pencil scratching against paper and his wife's humming filling the air and the evening light turning everything to gold, Caleb understood something he had spent $1 billion trying to learn. The most valuable thing a person can own is not a building or a company or a name on a magazine cover. It is this: a kitchen, a song, a child's homework, a second chance. And sometimes, the truth does not set you free all at once. Sometimes it sets you free slowly, one ordinary evening at a time. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it moved you, if it made you feel something real, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel. Every time you do that, you help stories like this reach people who need them. I will see you in the next one.